Hi there, this is Alvin, and welcome to Kickstart Commerce podcast, where we share search marketing and domain name investing strategies to help grow your business. In today's episode, I'll ponder and discuss a few thoughts from Paul Nicks NamesCon keynote, domain trends and insights. And while Paul discussed a number of trends throughout 2018 and predictions for 2019, one of the most intriguing points of his presentation for me was the sweet spot domain investor acquiring 3 to 6 domains daily at a cost of $50 to $75 per domain, and then turning around to sell them for $2,500 to $3,500. So, that being said, that was one of the most intriguing thoughts for me, just because being in the domain name industry for a while now, it's interesting. Most typical domain investors get started, and one of the first things that likely most go do, and you fall in a couple different camps here. So let me just kind of back up and state, you typically have those who do have a bankroll to get into this industry, and they're able to buy, the higher end, middle tier to higher end names. And then you have most of those that there's a market that's in between, but then most of everyone else starts out at the lower end, using a number of, techniques to hand register domains. And so I can remember, fortunately, having a consulting business that was doing rather well. And so I got into domain investing through website development, having a software development and engineering background. And so I would do websites for a number of small businesses that, may last anywhere from 3 to 5 years, or they may do different projects that would use a domain name. And for most businesses, they would say, hey, we want you to be our point of contact. You manage the domain name, you manage hosting, you manage all this stuff for us. And when those businesses either went out of business or they upgraded to a different domain, it was like, hey, what do you want to do with this old one? In some cases, they told me, hey, we don't care what happens. I tried to get some of them to buy them, while others just said, hey, we're done with this business. We don't need a domain anymore. It's your issue now. And so, I accumulated then 125 different domains that were just on auto renew for a period of years, and then wound up selling one that was, I think, total cost in was something like $30 over like a 2 to 3 year period, and wound up selling it for $500, and that was then my introduction. But I spent a lot of time reading blogs, and this was long before DN Academy was out, dnacademy.com, which I do recommend if you are a first-time investor. Certainly go start reading there. Start reading domaining.com, and I really say this, saying that don't invest a dime until you invest between those resources your time and effort to read and really begin to study. That being said, where this brings me with Paul is it made me think about just whether it was the best idea for a domain investor to really come in and start spending that type of money, $50 to $75 investment, and you base that on a couple of purchases, so 3 to 6 purchases in a given every day. I mean, what domain investor do you know likely has that type of money or that type of bankroll to be able to do something like that? I don't know that many that actually could do that every day. I mean, when you start looking at those numbers of purchasing 3 to 6 a day starting out, I mean, you're quickly up into the realm of $3,000 to $4,000 on a week if you keep that up. So across a given month, that's $12,000, that you're in, 12 to 16,000 rather, that you're in a given month if you keep it up. But then obviously you got to turn around and then sell those same domains. And I don't know too many people that could actually pull that off, not having experience. And so It really makes me, it really causes me a bit of angst to hear something like that being presented. Although I do understand that, hey, once you buy it, and what investors have to understand, and I don't think that coming into the industry you would think, oh, I bid on a name, I pay for the name, it takes me a day to get the name, I spin it back out, and somebody buys it by the end of the week. And that's just not the case, especially if you're talking about GoDaddy auctions. I know in certain cases, I can bid on a domain, let's say on Monday, and it may not be into my account for another 10 to 11 business days if the domain doesn't get renewed. So you say, okay, well, great. Let's start purchasing these domains. Let's take Paul's advice for a minute and go, I'm going to purchase 3 to 6 domains daily. Great. Well, then the other aspect of that is now, you at least have to be able to sell if we're truly looking at his numbers. So we said that we're anywhere between $3,000 to $4,000 a week in cost. So that means that you roughly need to sell at minimum of 2 domains per week. So how does that happen? Like I said, you either need a bankroll to get into a situation like this, or you do what most domain investors do, which is they start out hand registering. And not that that's an issue, but often is a time that most domains that get registered out of the gate aren't the best domains. I can remember having some domains that I just don't even dare mention, just because I shudder at, like, oh my goodness, I really thought that was a good domain at the time. And so the advice that I would say is, if you don't have that bankroll to do this sweet spot investing strategy as mentioned in Paul Nicks's NamesCon 2019 keynote, domain trends and insights, which I'll post a link there on my website when I release this podcast. If you can't do that strategy, then what I recommend is that if you're going to register, hand register domains, then there are going to be some key criteria that you want to maintain close to. And based upon that presentation, he does kind of highlight, or not even kind of, he does highlight a bit of the strategy of what sells, at least, looking at data through the GoDaddy auction. And so he does mention that second level domains, and so, think of the part that falls before the top level domain. So you have .com, the words before that. Typical SLDs are anywhere from 5 to 14 characters long. So in my opinion, what I would say is I tend to focus on anything between 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 characters long. And I want them to be 2 words, and 2 words that sound good together or make sense or describe a product or service when I'm matching up. I just don't want, any combination of words. Now, I will tell you that words with colors in it, words with animals, they tend to do better. Also, you want to stick to .com. And if not, then I'd say, hey, you might want to, if you're not going to do .com, I'd say go .org. Stay away from .net. While I've had a bit of success with .net, I just noticed that there are more companies that are willing to use a .org when a .com is not available. So for, first-time investors, it's these critical things that I go, man, if I had known or had this sort of, I guess you'd say this sort of strategy shared with me, the data in terms of, hey, really to make it in this industry, if you really want to make it good, what you really have to be able to do is have a bankroll that will allow you to do $3,000 to $4,000 worth of purchases in a given week. And then once you get those into your hands, you need to turn around and list them on GoDaddy Auction or Afternic or even Cedo, those platforms immediately, so that you can basically begin to turn, and it becomes it becomes the number game of volume, of how much can you turn in a short period of time. And so when you start talking about that, you get these, I know that there are many domain investors that'll go, well, hey, guess what? I want to, I want to purchase a domain. I want to get it into my hands. And then the first thing that they do is slap like a high, and I'm talking about high five figures. So anything north of $50,000, they just start slapping prices on it and expecting people to pay that. And then they wind up going broke. They can't make the renewals. And that's the other thing that you have to consider is, not only do you have to have a bankroll that keeps up with the purchases, you also have to have a bankroll that keeps up with the renewals. And I think that that's something that's missing from the equation as well. Although I do believe that Paul did mention it, but you start talking about 3 to 6 domains daily, and then you get upwards. You start talking about thousands of domains. I personally have about 1,500 domains. And like I said, I just started kind of dabbling in afternick.com. But I've actually spoken with people who are doing quite well with, they get the domains, they list them, and they're pulling down a six-figure salary. A six-figure profit margin. And so that's not bad. And some of them have been listed on domainsherpa.com. And so there are a few interviews there that a few of those people discuss. But then, I've had private conversations with folks that are in the domain industry, and, they've shared with me their thoughts about, what they're doing and how they're managing a profitable portfolio by using the numbers game. Another person that's good to check out that definitely is into the high volume game, and actually he does pretty good in terms of auctions as well as hand registration, and that's Josh Eisenhower from DSAD. So check out dsad.com. He actually has, I believe, a daily auction list of where he shares different thoughts, but he also I think he has I believe he has a Domain Sherpa episode where he shares his strategy and how it's a numbers game for him, and whether it's buying through auction or whether it is ultimately hand registering domains, he's able to turn quick profit. And so, that being said, I think coming into a strategy such as the sweet spot strategy that Paul mentions, as well as Josh Eisenhower and others use throughout, I think you have to have a realistic price standpoint. So if you start looking at, like Paul said, buying domains anywhere from 3 to 6 daily at $50 to $75 a pop, then you can't just go out and start. Well, you can go out and start putting the high 5-figure values, 6-figure values on these domains. But you also have to look and say that if you're going to do that, then you might be in a lane like a Birkins or Rick Schwartz, that it's going to be a good part of a decade before you're able to, flip something like that. Now, of course, if you're able to do it in less than a decade, hey, that's lightning in a bottle. Try to do that normal or on a regular basis. It just is unheard of in this industry. That being said, you want to focus on what is realistic, and what is realistic oftentimes is getting a domain that you pay $50 to $75 for and sticking it out there on, an Afternick or a domain sales platform with a buy it now of, anywhere of, I try to stay away from just flat values. So like 2,500, 2,000. I try to mix it up a bit with numbers, whether it's 1778, 1732, 1888. I try to mix it up with a bit of an off number. Sometimes I'll do 1889. But, for instance, I purchased a domain 2 years ago, earthbattery.com, for like $116, I believe was the auction price. And then I held it for 2 years. So, another total cost of, roughly $17 renewal fees. So it's roughly $130, $140, total cost, and sold it for, $2,400 via Afternic. Now, granted, that was, I could have gotten more, but at the same time, I'm looking and saying, where can you take $140, $150 and turn it into $2,400? Actually, it ended up being less than that after commissions. I think it was like $1,900 or a little over $1,900 that, I took home. But you look at that and go, that's not bad. $140 turned into $1,920. I mean, where else can you go and do something like that? Now, obviously, that's kind of what woke me up to go, okay, hey, maybe I should, at least with the portfolio that I have, although I'm not buying, 2 and 3 names daily via the auction, I am buying on a weekly basis. I may probably hit that 5 to 10 scenario within a given week of auctions. And so for me, I look at it and say it's worth a shot, but you also have to realize and go, I also have a consulting company. I have basically other means of revenue, of income sources that are coming in to cover the cost of living, the operating expenses of, my family, my wife and kids of 3, or a family of 3 kiddos. And so I have a consulting company that covers those expenses. And then outside of that, everything else. So the digital strategy, all the content marketing, the writing agreements and gigs that I have in place are basically funding, domain purchases, while at the same time, I also give myself, I have a goal. I said, hey, I want to be able to do 10 sales annually, with an average of anywhere, like I said, between $2,700 to $3,200. And then, I want a minimum of at least 3 sales per year, to cover the cost of the renewals. And so I go, it's all you have to have a strategy of some sort to say, okay, well, if I don't get these sales from the domains, or I haven't made it to the point where I'm purchasing high quality domains, or even just mid quality domains that can fetch those sales to cover domain renewals, how are you going to cover it? You don't need to be covering that with money that should be allocated for paying mortgages and car loans, or just daily living. You have to have something else. And that being said, I can't tell you the number of domain investors that ultimately, they reach out to me and say, hey, Alvin, I have a portfolio of 100, 200 domains. And honestly, for me, I look at it and I go, man, some of those domains, just because of my background in development, I could develop them. But I mean, when you start talking about development, you're talking about that's years of investment. That's literally starting another business from scratch. And so you have to figure out, are you going to be in the development business? Or are you going to be in the domain name business? Or a domain name business, meaning that you're going to be a flipper. So quick acquisition, quick flip, quick turnaround. And that's all about volume. That's all about numbers. Or are you going to be, are you going to take the approach of like a Rick Schwartz? Now, granted, he has a different caliber of domain, but that being said, that same approach, you may not be able to buy that caliber of domain, but you can get you some good domains that you can hold on to. I've found a number of gems in the GoDaddy auction that I'm just sitting on. And, those domains might get passed to, or likely to get passed to, my kids just through inheritance. And so, I don't plan on selling them in my lifetime. Not unless that right deal comes along. But then there are those that, like I said, I have 1,500 domains and growing. And there are certain domains that I just look at. I'm like, man, come on, dude, you're never going to build a business on top of that. And you got it for closeout pricing. And so sometimes, I'm able to get it right when it goes into the closeout price of $11. So, I'll pay $20 for it. Hey, if I can take a $20 domain and flip it in the first 6 months, for anywhere north of $1,800, then, hey, that's good. I'm game. Let it go. I'm not going to build a business on it anyway. And so, you really have to think about what your strategy is and what you're able to do at this moment in time. There are seasons in life that you may be able to do more or less. And so, you just have to really figure out what is best for you. And so I just thought it was interesting enough just to discuss, Paul's point in his presentation about, the sweet spot for domain investors is really acquiring 3 to 6 domains daily at a cost of $50 to $75 per domain, and then quickly selling them for anywhere between $2,500 and $3,500. I thought that was just interesting, in that, to a certain extent, I caution domain investors. While it sounds good, and you go, well, hey, that person wouldn't be on stage, they wouldn't be saying this if it weren't true. While there is a kernel of truth to what Paul is saying, he is not lying or blatantly deceiving. What I will say is this, that it takes you a minute, if you're getting into this industry, to gather your sea legs, to really get your bearings under you. And each of us have a different skill set. And with that skill set, there are some of us that are good at investing in, shorter 4-letter, 3-character, 4-character, 5-character domains. While others of us, we're good at 3 and 4, 4-word domains. And then you have some that are only good with brandable domains. Then you have some that are good with keywords. And then you have others that are good with 1 word. And then others that are just into numerics. And then some that are into country code or CCTLDs. And then some that have just specialized in new domain extensions. And so it's a varied and splintered industry. And so, don't take it as you looked at a presentation, it said that this could be done, and go out and start plowing money into this. You really just need to take your time, use a bit of wisdom. Like I said, everything that he mentioned in that presentation shouldn't be taken at face value, and you go out and do it. There are nuggets of wisdom, like investing in, if you're going to invest in more than 1 word, settle in on 2 words. Make sure that those characters are anywhere between 5 to 14. Like I said, mine personally is 8 to 12. Make sure that it's .com. And if it's not .com, then .org should be your next, it should be your next extension of choice. And outside of that, I mean, it really, I go, hey, it's up to you to really, I guess you'd say, verify, the strategy that you want to do, and set parameters around it, and set different criteria. And then the last but not least, the bigger thing about any domain sale is what price you sell at. If you're buying it for $50, $75, so less than $100, in my opinion, I go, hey, don't put it more than $3,500. Really, the sweet spot's probably going to be anywhere between $2,000 to $2,500. And like I said, then as well, you may consider, hey, that $3,500 or $2,500 or $2,000 price mark, but you also have to start thinking about the cost. So the cost of transaction, whether you do it through escrow or whether it's listed on Afternic, and you're going to have to give up, a bit of that money to be able to take part in such a highly visible platform. And so, you're going to have to be willing to to give up. And so, like I told you with the sale of Earth Battery, it was a sale at $2,400, but I only brought home, $1,900. And I say only, but that's a reasonable, that's a good sale. Could I gotten more? Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, dude, you're not going to build a business on this. You've had it for 2 years. Flip it. Flip it. Leave a little meat on the bone for the next person, and just know that you can go back to the well and pull different domains and gems out. And so I hope that this podcast is enlightening. I hope that you also ponder and go through and actually read. I encourage you to read Paul's, go take a look at the slides that he presented here at NamesCon, and begin to compare your portfolio to what is being mentioned in his presentation, as well as compare your portfolio, but compare your strategy and put these things in your mind as you're whether it's you're on the GoDaddy platform, NameJet, SnapNames, whatever the platform you find yourself buying different domains or hand registering. Start thinking about when you register, does this meet that criteria? Could you quickly begin to flip this if you bought it, listed it, and could you flip it, for that sweet spot, that $2,500, $3,500 value. So with that, we're out of time. And like I said, I hope that you find this podcast, especially this one that we're talking about, the sweet spot for investment. I hope that you found it beneficial. Definitely let me know if you have questions, or even if you have insights from your own domain investing experience. I would love to hear from you. So let your voice be heard. So thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Kickstart Commerce podcast, where we share search marketing and domain name strategies to help grow your business. Please subscribe to this podcast via iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or Podbean. And last but not least, please visit kickstartcommerce.com to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, sharing tips and tricks about the disciplines of digital strategy. Thanks, and that's all for now.